Oregon and Boise State. All right, I got my notes here. Yes, I am a nerd. I take notes as I watch games because I love it too much, probably. But Oregon and Boise State, the line closed at 18.5 in favor of Oregon. I believe it was 18.5. But this was the game all week. All week. Everyone said just the explanation for Oregon beating the crap out of Boise State, which everyone basically said was going to happen, was Dan Lanning, get right game. They're getting back. It's the get right game. And I was like, no. I predicted Boise State to pull the upset 34-33 with a Dalmas game-winning field goal. Little did I know it was going to be 37-34 Oregon with Atticus Sappington kicking the 25-yard game-winning field goal. But I was correct on basically how this game would play out from the explosive plays. One thing I didn't was the special teams. I touted special teams being in favor of Boise State, which technically kicking the ball it is. But Dalmas did miss a deep 50. But it was 2 for 3 overall. Hard place, Austin Stadium, deep field goal. Not going to blame him for that. However, I didn't take into account that Boise State could not tackle on special teams and saw one of the worst angles ever. Why do people not realize you run to where he's going to be, not where he is at? Don't run at the guy who's over there while he's full speed sprinting, who's a track star, because by the time you get there, he's 40 yards that way. If you're the long snapper, run directly to the sideline as he is returning back there. And then the tackle, immediately, the first tackle on the punt return for a touchdown, the gunner, he's going down the side, just sticks his left arm out, and that's how he tries to tackle, and then right off of him. Poor tackling, just absolutely poor tackling. Ridiculous, and you have the kickoff return for a touchdown. But by the way, how do we keep dropping footballs when people score? How is that still a thing? Just hold the ball through the end zone. This keeps happening. Hold on to the damn football. But Oregon still got the touchdown for people who said, oh, they shouldn't have scored. At first, I thought the same thing. I was like, that's bullshit. But they recovered it in the end zone. And even if it wasn't going to be his teammate recovering it, they would have gotten the ball back right where the fumble was at basically the inch line, and they would have put it in anyways. But let's go ahead and get deeper into this game. Ashton Jeanty had 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. I said he was going to get his. He got his because Boise State's offensive line, with every good running back comes a good offensive line. That is a true fact. Always. Always. And Boise State's offensive line is a great offensive line. One of the better in the country. That was a bad sentence right there. That's some Southern talk. They're one of the best in the country, in my opinion, because how they play. They're not necessarily the best offensive linemen, but that unit is so solid together. They create holes that are perfect, and I know Oregon's defensive line, I figured Boise State was a great matchup on the offensive line against Oregon's defensive line. I saw some Oregon fans who were upset about their defensive line not being able to get through, and when they were missing some tackles. But, bro, you're playing Ashton Jeanty back there. Let's just be honest. That's the best running back you're going to play all year, best player in college football, except you do have Ohio State where you have Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. But right now, you're not gonna tell me that Ashton Jeanty is not better than both those guys. And it worked perfect. The offensive line for Boise State did its job. So when we go next to the targeting, undisciplined play was a big problem for Boise State in Week 1 against Georgia Southern, and it was a problem when they got the targeting on Dylan Gabriel. It was just Alexander Tubner just made a really split-second decision to hit him when he really shouldn't have, and next thing you know, it results in a 59-yard touchdown to Trayshawn Holden, who basically just split up the middle, and he was gone. And this happened in Week 1 against Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern was in their own territory, I believe, inside their own 20, and there was a roughing the passer, I believe, or just a personal foul, necessarily for something on the quarterback, unnecessary roughness or whatever, and that play got Georgia Southern a first down, and that drive resulted in a touchdown. You can't make plays like that, especially against a team that is that talented and that explosive, and give them 15 yards, because as we saw, you have the 59-yard touch just like that. As quick as a light switch, Oregon can score when they get it right, and they did a few times. I said they were going to have the explosive plays. I keyed it out for Boise State. I was like, you got to limit the explosive plays. To their credit, they kind of did. There were a few times where there was chances, but Dylan Gabriel is so inconsistent on a deep ball. He had Evan Stewart, and I believe Tez Johnson, or was it Trayshawn Holden? I don't know. He had another deep ball. There was 2 deep balls that should have been then caught for Oregon, which could have made the game a lot worse in their favor, but there was also times where if Boise State could have tackled, they would have made the game worse in their favor. This was just a weird game. You can flip a coin, and this game goes either way, but Boise State did enough to win and enough to lose. Oregon did enough to win and not enough to lose. It was a great game. It was so much fun, but like I said, you can bash the secondary. I said Maddox Madsen was going to have a game where he steps up and he's not just kind of Not really. He's going to have to be the anchor of the offense because I said Ginty was going to get his, and he kind of got close to what I said he was going to get. I said Maddox needed to make throws to possibly throw some guys open or make throws that he doesn't normally make, which it was 17 for 40, but he kind of did. Like the big 3rd and 9 on your second to last drive before you got the false start that killed the drive after the kick return for the touchdown, which you could kind of feel, which I hate that moment when you're watching a big underdog take on a bigger team and you can tell when that moment happens where the upset's not going to happen, and that was the kick return touchdown to tie the game. Like, you just knew. And then that false start happens after getting the big 3rd and 9. I think he hit Cam Camper on the outside for that. But the false start killed the next drive, and then it was just the offense kind of stalled out for Boise State. But either way, that was as hard of a game as you're going to play if you're Boise State. You looked great. Good losses are now a thing for teams not named Alabama and Ohio State now that we're in the 12-team playoff era, and G5 gets in. I think Oregon's going to get better over the year. They're still finding their identity. Everyone's doom and gloom on them, but this was a great win for them. I said I wasn't going to bash Oregon if they won this game, no matter how close it was. The only way I said I was going to say anything about Oregon that was bad, really, was if they just got absolutely blown out and there's bigger issues at hand. But you got to be happy if you're a Boise State fan. A lot of them thought they were going to get blown out because the media just kept telling them they were going to get blown out, but they didn't really know anything about Boise State because they don't watch you. They don't care about you because you're not one of the 8 schools that gets them all their views. So they're only going to talk about you if you end up playing one of those schools. And even this, I watched some videos about Boise State. There aren't really any. It's all just Oregon sucks. And they should have squashed this lower-level team better. No one gave Boise State any credit in any videos I've seen, which is wild. But you got to give Oregon credit for this game, too, just like for Boise State. This is one of the better teams you're going to play all year. I know they're in the Big Ten. That Boise State team is better than like half the damn Big Ten. It just bugs me when people discredit teams that deserve to be credited, but that's a conversation for another day. So let's go ahead and get into Oregon. You know, they won how they had to. It's really as simple as that. Good teams win. There's been championship teams that have had struggles. I know for sure the year when we had Cam Newton, our radio guy called us the Cardiac Cats because we just couldn't not win close games. Like, all the time. Everything was close. That's just how it was. There's teams that simply just find a way to win in different ways multiple times. And for Oregon, it was special teams. There's 3 different aspects of football. Offense, defense, and special teams. It's there. Special teams, special plays, special players was for real for Oregon, and it was enough to get them the win. Look, you can criticize. I know the offensive line, there was a lot of rotation, okay? And maybe a little bit too much rotation, not enough time for one to kind of set, but they're still trying to find offensive line. Even Sharon Moore said it at Michigan. They got bigger problems. But it takes time for a good offensive line to mesh. You don't just throw together an offensive line overnight. I get you've given up almost like double the amount of sacks as you had last year, but to be fair, Dylan Gabriel's not Bo Nix. He does not have the elusivity that Bo Nix had, the ability to extend and create plays on plays that possibly could have been sacks. But going back to Gabriel, another thing we can talk about him is he's got to be more consistent. I know the offensive line doesn't help, but like I said, when I was talking about Boise State, he even had those 2 deep balls that were there. And I just don't get how he's not hitting these. It's almost as if he's just not comfortable yet. Like, which kind of goes back to another thing. Play calling. Oregon seems like they're trying too hard to do too much, and then they oversimplify it, like when there was like 1st and 15, I think, and they ran the ball 3 straight times up the middle. They either go too far or they try to condense it too much, and I think that's another thing that's not helping the offensive line or the identity really kind of be able to be formed from the OC. I mean, I could be overthinking that, to be honest, but that's just my opinion. Gabriel was sacked 4 times in the first half. That does have to be cleaned up. Boise State's defensive front isn't necessarily the best, but they're not the worst. Still, that's, like I said, Lanning said he's going to keep shuffling, but I think you got to give him a little bit more time to kind of find that key that you want on the offensive line. But they got a good time to do it. You got 3 games and a bye week before you have Ohio State come to town, which is very important. But you gave up 4 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. That's something you can't ignore. There's times that Dylan Gabriel really just needs to understand that maybe he's moving a little bit too fast, because there's times where he does hold on to it too much. And I think a lot of the identity is going to rest on him getting comfortable for the offense. The defense is fine. Don't get me wrong. You can bash Oregon's defense if you want for this game, but they played one of the better offenses they're going to play all year. You can argue the quarterback position. I'll give you that for other Big Ten teams. But from a perspective of offensive line and running back, that's it. You're not going to find much better, in my opinion. People are going to hate that I said that, but because of the power conferences. Jabbar Muhammad, by the way, on defense for Oregon, 6 tackles, half a tackle for loss, 3 passes batted, an incredible one on third down as well. Got to highlight him. He was incredible. But 9 penalties, 74 yards for Oregon as well, 4 of them being holds. Another thing on the offensive line there, it really is. I mean, you got to find the identity, but here's the thing. If Oregon gets it right, I'm not worried about this team at all. With you are so explosive that if things work out correctly, that pass is going to get hit from Gabriel to Evan Stewart most of the time. It was kind of 50-50 in this one, or Trayshawn, or Tez if you get him out there. I mean, this offense has so much potential to just explode. And it's going to happen. Patience pays off. I mean, it really does. Like I said, you have the bye week. Then you have at UCLA and Michigan State before you have Ohio State. People are trying to panic on Oregon. Don't get caught up in it. You do have Dan Lanning. Like I said, people were talking about, Dan Lanning. Give him time. Things don't just happen overnight. Like I said, patience pays off. Oregon's going to be fine. Like I said, when we look at this game, I've kind of rambled on this, but there was just so many thoughts I had in my head about this game. This was a win-win for both teams. Both teams got a win, Boise State lost, but Boise State got a good loss against a should-be playoff opponent in Oregon, regardless of the struggles right now. I think they're going to figure it out. Oregon got a win over a should-be playoff team in Boise State, in my opinion, for the G5. Both teams had weaknesses exposed against an elite talent that they really get to see on film. So if you have trouble with your run defense for Oregon, a defensive line, you get a lot of good film against a team that's very elite at being able to run the ball. For Boise State, I don't really know if necessarily the film will be that great just because you're getting torched on some of these, but you're not going to play guys like Evan Stewart and Trayshawn Holden and Tez Johnson in the Mountain West Conference. No hate to the Mountain West Conference. You're my favorite conference to watch outside of my Auburn Tigers and the SEC, but let's just keep it simple. Those guys are the real deal. And this is a win-win for both teams, like I said. This is great. When we look down the road, I believe when Boise State's fighting for that playoff spot and Oregon's going to be in that 12, we're going to look at this and we're going to be like, look, that team most likely is in the playoff. Oregon has a win over them, 37-34. You look at Boise State, it's like, man, they almost went into Autzen. They almost got that win. They probably should have got that win over Oregon. They didn't, but they've showed they can compete with a team like them. So, win-win for both teams. This might have gone a little bit too long, but Boise State, hell of a game. Oregon, great game. Good teams find ways to win, even if it's not the normal way.